Good evening, namaste. I'm Sunita Vishwanath and I am a co-founder of Hindus for Human Rights. I am a grassroots human rights activist. I was born in Madras, India. I'm 51 years old. I was born into an upper caste Hindu family, a girl child. And when I was 1 year old, my parents, like so many Indians, left this country and went to the UK to seek a better life. And it so happened that I spent the ages of 5 to 10 in India again without my parents. So those 5 years in India, living in an upper caste Hindu family in Madras, really made me who I am. So in my family, we practiced, and this is an issue of deep pain and shame for me. In my family, when I was a child, we practiced untouchability. When we had a haircut, because the caste of the person who cuts your hair is lower, we had to take a shower. And every single day, the woman who would come into our house and clean the toilet, we called her scavenger. And we could not touch her. In fact, we could not even lay eyes on her. And I, as a little child, I was always that child that said, no, that's not fair. Why? That was me, and I'm still that person. That child is still in me that says, no, that's not fair. And so when I would say, that's not fair, my family would allow me to ask those questions. So I was empowered. I was a girl that was allowed to ask questions. But still, this untouchability continued. And in fact, you know, this is something so deeply personal, but when this lady would leave the house, and I knew that I wasn't allowed to look at her, and I would sneak a look at her, thinking I was doing something wrong because I was just a little child. She would leave these very perfect footprints. You know how in our Hindu homes we have little footprints of Lakshmi or Krishna? She would leave these footprints wet because she had just cleaned the bathroom, leaving the house, and secretly I would step in her footprints. Because in my core, in my heart, in my bones, I don't think you should ever think of another human being that way, that you cannot touch them, you cannot even look at them. So that was part of my truth. But the rest of my Hinduism was quite empowering. I was taught by my family that we are all one. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, this idea of ekatva, we are all one. That there's no, I mean, we were taught, you know, the Bhagavad Gita, where Lord Krishna says, no matter who you are, you know, you can be absolutely anyone as long as your heart is full of love and devotion, I will accept you. And no matter whether you offer me even just a little bit of water or a leaf, I will accept it if you bring it to me with love and devotion. I was raised to think that, you know, God accepts everyone as his or her own. And so this idea of equality, God is equally present in each one of us, is really the core of Hinduism that I was raised with. And the other half of that teaching is this notion of dharma, that you must think about, and this changes every single minute, you must think about what it is that you're supposed to do, and do it with all of your heart. And then let it go, and don't think about, did you succeed, did you fail, what was your impact? These are, you know, in our boardrooms, the measurable objectives in all of our organizations that we have to think about. At the level of dharma, you do what you're supposed to do, and you let it go, and you think of it as an offering. And if you feel that you've made a mistake, then you correct it, because you have to keep acting and keep living. So this notion of dharma, living in this present, ever-present way, thinking about what is the right thing for me to do and do it. This is how my parents raised me. So then I grew up and became a women's rights activist. because I was that girl who always questioned and always said what is fair, what is not fair, and I lived my life and I worked in many women's organizations. I ended up co-founding an organization called Women for Afghan Women. And that organization is now 20 years old, and it is the largest Afghan women's organization in the world. It started tiny in New York, where I was living at the time, and it has grown to be present in 14 provinces of Afghanistan. Who am I to start this organization? I am a Hindu woman, born in Madras, raised in UK, and living in the US. Why should I start an organization for the women of Afghanistan? It is because of these two core teachings, that we are all one, and if women are suffering in Afghanistan or Brooklyn or Bronx or in UP, it is my job, it is my duty to care about anyone, anywhere that is suffering and do something about it. And the doing something about it comes from the notion of dharma. It is my duty to act. For me, I'm a karma yogi. For me, if I see suffering, I must address it. This is the message that I get from the Bhagavad Gita or any other religious text, Hindu text. So this is why I made a connection with the country of Afghanistan. I saw the suffering of the women and the men and the children there, and I went shoulder to shoulder with the men and women of Afghanistan to do this work. And that work is very grassroots, because my passion is a grassroots one. So during the 20 years of working with Afghan men and women, I would often ask the people that I work with, why do you do this work? Why do you go to work every day knowing that you could be killed and you may not come home? And without any exception, every one of them would say, it is my duty as a Muslim. And the men would say, it is my duty by my sisters and my daughters. There's one thing that they say in Afghanistan, that in order for a bird to fly, you need two wings, balanced. And so the brothers in Women for Afghan Women will always say that they need to be, side by side with the women. And these are the messages that I would get. Now, during all of the years of my own life, and especially the last 20 years, what I am very painfully aware of is that in my Hindu space, in my family, in my temple community, in the Hindu community at large, and in India, because my extended family is right here in India, what has been growing is this Hindu nationalist feeling. I've seen it, I've felt it, I've heard the messages. What in my spaces where I exist and I pray, the way that it is expressed is really a hatred of Muslims. It comes out as a real fear of Muslims, dislike of Muslims, threat from Muslims, and hatred of Muslims. And I've heard this from people that I love, and I cannot stop loving the people that I love, but I do not like this message. And being inspired by the Muslim men and women that I work so closely with, I began to hunger for a Hindu expression that mirrors this expression from my Afghan brothers and sisters that I work with. I wanted to hear from Hindus, why do you work for women's rights? Or why do you work for the environment? Or why do you work for the betterment of any people or animals or any good works that you do? Why do you do it? I hungered to hear people say, it is my duty as a Hindu. Because honestly, if you asked me, why am I working on social justice issues, I would always say, it's my dharma to do this work. And so this question nagged at me of where are Hindus? I know about Gandhiji, I know about so many social reformers who were motivated by Hindu ideas to lead great revolutions. And I also know that in so many of the social justice struggles, civil rights, anti-slavery in America, the vanguard are often people of faith. So I had this question, where are the Hindus who want to speak love? Where all I'm hearing in my Hindu spaces is hate, honestly. And the people who are born into Hindu families, who are in the movements that I am a part of, their name shows that they're Hindu, they are devotedly secular. And that's not a bad thing. I understand. Until 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't say in a social justice setting, I'm a Hindu, because it wasn't really done. And this notion of secular world is something that I love. I would love a world where we can all keep our faith private and come together as citizens to do work. This is my ideal. I love separation of state and religion. I love that. However, what was happening and what is happening now, and maybe is at its zenith, is that religion is most certainly in the state. Religion is most certainly in the government, in the political space. But because of our devotion to this notion of secular, we have somehow taken away religion from the political space with good intentions, no doubt. Nevertheless, by being quiet about the truth of faith, for people of faith, we have somehow ceded the religious space to people who do not have progressive values. And this is something that I'm quite sure of, because I've seen that in the movements that I work, people like me who definitely are people of faith have been quiet about their faith, and therefore that whole political space has been taken over by right-wing people of all religions, including Hindus. And so in 2011, a few things happened that led me to say enough is enough. This question bothers me enough that I need to do something about it. See, until then, I didn't think I was religious enough. I wasn't taught enough. I don't speak Sanskrit. You know, maybe I'm not the right person to do something about it. I would look to priests or swamis or swaminis to really step into that space. But a few things happened in 2011 that made it impossible for me to be quiet. So the main incident in my life that led me to be on this new path of faith-based activism, specifically progressive Hindu activism, it happened when Sandeep Pandey, my friend, is working hard actually to figure out how to create in Ayodhya, in the site of such turmoil, such a crisis of faith in India. He is thinking of how can he create a multi-faith communal harmony center. And that's today. Back in 2011, my good friend Daisy Khan, who's a Kashmiri who lives in New York, she wanted to start an Islamic cultural center, which would have within it a little mosque, but mostly it would be a community center for everybody to come together of all different faiths and come together in harmony. It's really a very similar idea to Sandeep Pandey's. It was going to be called Park 51, and it was dubbed by the media, which was not friendly to this idea, Ground Zero Mosque. And many people opposed this idea because this site was very close to Ground Zero, which was the site of 9/11, and the opposition was that when so many lives were taken by people of the Muslim faith, how can you possibly, it's sacrilege, it's a dishonor to the lives lost to create an Islamic center so close to that site of tragedy. This was the view of the opposition. Whereas the view of my friend Daisy and all of us who supported her is that this tragedy has happened. How can we bring some sanity and some faith and some harmony out of a tragedy? And the idea was that if you can make an Islamic center, a peaceful center, because Islam means peace, and invite into that center people of all faiths and people of no faith, everybody to come together and build harmony together in that site where the atrocity happened, so that we can make something beautiful out of the loss. That was the idea of that Park 51, and my friend was working on it. I came with a group of Afghan women from Queens, because I was doing my work in Women for Afghan Women, to come and support this effort. And I was standing with my group of women, and it was an interfaith rally that was happening. And I had my usual passing thought, I see all the religions represented except mine. And this has always been a painful thing for me, that in all the social justice issues where you have an imam and a priest and a rabbi, I always wish there was a Hindu among them. And it was not the case. And I just was there standing, and I heard a Hindu prayer. I heard a beautiful Shanti mantra over a megaphone, and my eyes filled up with tears, and I thought, this is it. This is what I've been hoping for and praying for, and this is the Hinduism that I want to be a part of, a Hinduism that stands at the site of tragedy for peace. And I looked up, and that Hindu man dressed in saffron was not in our peace vigil. He was on the other side of the police, standing with the group of people that thought this was sacrilege. This was a Hindu man that really thought that Islam was terrorism, all Muslims are terrorists, and we can never build a communal harmony site close to ground zero. And that was my moment of no return. And I said to myself, I am here. There may not be anybody else here to speak for Hinduism, but I am here. And what is the use of my being and my pain if I cannot give it voice? And from that moment in the fall of 2011, I have never been in the presence of hatred being expressed in the name of Hinduism and not spoken up. And that was fall of 2011. Soon after that, we created an organization called Sadhana Coalition of Progressive Hindus. We have been working in the Hindu space in the United States, asking simple questions. If you think that a mountain or a river is divine, what are you doing to put that belief into practice? Are you cleaning the polluted river? Are you making sure that trees are planted on the mountain? What are you doing to put your faith into action? Sadhana to us means faith in action. If you worship a Devi, if you worship Goddess Lakshmi or Saraswati, how are you treating the women in your life? How are you treating your wife, your mother, your sister? Are you making sure that your daughters receive the same education as your sons? These are the simple questions that we ask in the Hindu space. And we are welcomed, and people engage with us, and we see change. And we work not only with Indians in America, we work a lot with Indo-Caribbean Hindus. They're actually the community that welcome us the most. And perhaps it is because the Indo-Caribbeans have had a journey, a very difficult journey of migration, and they have suffered, and they really hold on dearly to their faith. And their children study the faith, they study the Gita and other religious texts, and they have dialogues and debates within the temple, and they are influenced by the church, so that if you go into an Indo-Caribbean temple, they meet Sunday mornings, in the temple, everybody comes and they have a group conversation. And so perhaps those structures enable us to work in the Indo-Caribbean temple space, but this is part of what we are doing. So then, over the last 10 years, we have been working, 9 years in Sadhana, and addressing every social justice issue that we care about. In the wake of the election, the last presidential election, the rhetoric of the Trump campaign was severely Islamophobic and anti-immigrant. So we really brought immigrant rights and Islamophobia in the center of our work. And we participated in many rallies against hatred, against Islamophobia. And we were always the only Hindu group. Every other faith community has many organizations working, and churches and synagogues and mosques. When it comes to the Hindu community, it's pretty much us. We are a tiny, unfunded organization, and pretty much it's us and our volunteer members around the country that show up and add a Hindu voice of peace. And then, so we were doing our work, and we were doing it because it brought meaning to our life. And as we did the work, we realized that the most central issue, the non-negotiable for us, for being a Hindu, for calling ourselves a Hindu, is to deal with caste. The reason why in the progressive spaces, Hinduism has a particularly bad reputation compared to all the other faiths is this blemish, this sin, if you like, of caste. And so we, from the very beginning, have been trying to figure out how can we be Hindus that are addressing caste? How can we be Hindus that are involved in anti-caste work? We want the annihilation of caste as Hindus. And actually, we can only call ourselves Hindus if we are working on the project of abolishing caste. If that is not part of what we are able to do, we will not be Hindus. The only way we can bear to be Hindus is to be against caste. That's the kind of Hindu we are. And what we have found in the last 9 years is that young people in Hindu families in the States find us. They become so suffocated by conservatism and outright hatred and Islamophobia in their community space that they look online usually for an alternative, and they find us, and we are able to organize debates and dialogues and workshops on what progressive Hinduism looks like. And you can go to our website sadhana.org to see that work we are doing in the United States. Now, as the last 9 years progressed, you all know, being Indians, that the political climate in this country has been it's been in crisis. I don't think anybody anywhere on the political spectrum would deny that there's a real political crisis in India. And being people who are, many of us are Indians, I'm Indian, I come to India almost every year, my whole extended family is here, and I consider my family my most important community. And so I know how this political expression of Hindu nationalism has really risen and grown in size and volume. And this is something that as Hindus, we have really been pained by, troubled by, and feel that as progressive Hindus, it is our work to address. And so we have these conversations within our families, we have these conversations within our communities about what is this Hindu nationalism? What is Hindutva? It seems to us that Hindutva is exactly the opposite of what we consider to be Hinduism. Hindutva seems to place Hinduism as superior to all other religions, whereas Hinduism, the way we understand it, Gandhi's Hinduism, our Hinduism, says that all the religions are equal, absolutely equal. And in fact, you go back to the earliest Hindu text, the Rig Veda, and it tells you, Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. What does that mean? Truth is one, wise men call it by different names. That means that every strand of thought, every single school of thought is equal. That means every faith is equal. So how can people who call themselves Hindus consider that their religion is superior to all other religions? Again, in real Hinduism that I embrace, there is a real beloved tenet of non-violence, of non-harm, of ahimsa. And we have the most precious prayers are Shanti mantras. So when Hinduism is supposed to be peaceful, then how is it that this political expression of Hinduism, this Hindutva, is actually paramilitaristic, not just violent, paramilitaristic? In so many ways, what is being considered Hinduism is diametrically the opposite of what we consider Hinduism. And this is a conversation, a dialogue that we are having in our communities. And because it is our families, and because it is our mother, our father, our sister, our uncle, we cannot be in perpetual warfare. That we cannot cut off our arm and our leg. Similarly, we cannot cut off from our father and our mother. So this dialogue that we are having about what is Hinduism, we feel is where there might be some kind of hope for the Hindu community to see itself in the mirror and see that the path that we are on is a path to destruction. Destruction perhaps of the country, perhaps of Hinduism itself. And it's of deep concern to us. We are very concerned. We are people in the organizations that I am a part of, we are in America, but we have a love for India. Our families are here, we consider it our first home. And so sometimes Indians think, you're in America, what do you know? It's not your business. But actually, the same way that I work in a country like Afghanistan, which is not my country, this is actually my country. I feel it is my right and my duty to raise my voice no matter where I see injustice, but certainly in the country where I was born, I feel it is my right and my duty to speak. So in the recent months, we've created a new platform. It's called Hindus for Human Rights, and we are US-based. We have one member who is actually based in India. We are young but growing, and we are specifically and explicitly an advocacy platform. And so we will speak from the Hindu perspective on political issues, like for instance, we are adding our Hindu voice to the protests that are happening around the very problematic and Islamophobic policies of CAA and NRC. We are adding our voices to the protests here in India, and even perhaps more importantly for us, in so many cities across the states. And often, in fact, usually, we are the only Hindu voice among those protests. And we have, in this regard, we have a simple question for the Hindu community, for the Indian community abroad, and for Indians. What is the role of practicing Hindus in saving the Indian democracy, in saving the Indian constitution? Whatever is happening in India, the governing party, the BJP, and the organizations that affiliate with it, there's no denying that they are Hindu parties and organizations, and they're in fact a right-wing Hindu network of organizations, the Sangh Parivar. So all of this is happening on the backs of Hinduism. I don't think there is any way to deny that. It's happening in the Hindu space. Some of the lynchings that happened of Muslims, the call for those lynchings happened inside Hindu temples. The fact that this is, and the lynchings that happened because of suspicion or accusation of beef consumption or killing of cows, that comes from this wish that the Hindu idea that cows are sacred and beef must not be eaten. I'm a Hindu. I consider the cow sacred. I don't eat beef. But just like Gandhi said when he was alive, I also believe that that should not be the law of a land where not everybody is Hindu and not everybody shares that belief. So there's no denying that what is happening in this country is happening in the name of Hinduism, on the back of Hinduism, and is leading dangerously to creating a Hindu state. And so in that circumstance, in that context, the question that I ask, because I'm not an Indian national, what is the role of a believing, practicing Hindu in this project of saving India and saving the Constitution and saving the Indian democracy? This is the question I bring everywhere I go. I am speaking to you today because I was invited to speak. Usually when I'm in a space in India, I listen. And I hope that I can hear from many of you who are practicing Hindus. What is your role? What is your role in saving your Matrabhumi? Thank you. Namaste.